But I think the number one thing that we all have to come to grips with is when we don't have power. What happens when we don't have power, and how are we able to communicate?
Welcome to the Smart Cities Council podcast and its special series with our global thought leaders. Smart Cities Council's global thought leadership team is an exclusive group of subject matter experts driving policy and standards, setting industry trends, conducting research, and building and sharing knowledge to advance our mission. My name is Fanni Melles. I am the global thought leader for youth engagement at the Smart Cities Council, and today I welcome Bobby Perkins to the podcast, who is the global thought leader for 5G and digital infrastructure. Bobby Perkins is a thought leader with a mission to create ubiquitous, sustainable, reliable next-G infrastructure for smart cities and smart base, in collaboration with academia, industry, and government, to make the world a safer place. Bobby, welcome to the podcast. Let's start with an easy question. What does 5G and digital infrastructure mean for smart cities?
So 5G is number one, the transport. It's the network transport that allows for communication, application access, video surveillance. There are numerous amounts of different types of use cases, whether it's for smart cities, smart bases. We're talking about network transport. As we look at smart cities from a 100,000-foot point of view, the one thing that I always like to say is that smart cities rely upon fiber optics, critical infrastructure, and our governments. Our governments have a huge place in this overall ecosystem, not only just from a funding perspective, but also from the perspective that they want to see our cities, our municipalities, and our countries to be very successful and be sustainable, not just for the government, but also for the people, the citizens that live in these communities and municipalities. The last part I will also say in relation to your question is the education. STEM, science and technology and education, is huge as it relates to being part of a smart city. We like to call it smart thinking, being able to think with a purpose, utilizing not only just the technology, but also vegetables, eating properly, thinking properly, being at peace, being calm, so that we can make the right decisions for our future.
What does smartness mean to you? Because for me, it means thinking ahead, solving problems, and innovation and evolution. While you just said that we need to have smart thinking, what does smartness mean to you?
Yeah, it's a mindset. The mindset is that we have to change little by little on what we used to do. Maybe it's instead of having plastic bags at the grocery store, maybe using recyclable bags. Instead of using plastic containers, maybe it's using glass jars. It's about being sustainable and utilizing the technologies that we have, IoT, satellite communication, 5G, private networks, to be able to run the analytics to show proof that we know that if we change these things, change our mindset, right, and being able to do things just a little bit differently, then we're actually prolonging our environment. A lot of people say go green G, and I understand that. And I also talk about those things. But the challenge is very simple. It's the mind. So when I say smart thinking, it's making decisions daily that will change our day-to-day life for the better. For example, instead of purchasing water from a grocery store, maybe it's utilizing a spring resource close by your home or having it brought in to be able to say, hey, we're not only using those dollars and cents to be able to have fresh spring water that, number one, is going to give us the nutrients to make us think better, to think longer, to be regenerative, but also we're giving back to that economy, our local economy. And these are the things that we're talking about when we talk about sustainability.
I would like to ask you to explain us what do you mean by network transport? Because if we just throw out the transport into the conversation, then we will think about cars and roads. I would think about it because I am a future of cities researcher, so that's mainly what means for me transport. So, what is this transport you are talking about?
This network transport goes beyond just 5G. It goes to the core, meaning fiber optics, copper, it's satellite communications, device to device communication systems. And now we're talking about not only device to device, but satellite to device, right? And what that means is it's a hyper converged ecosystem where all the technologies that have gone before us and that we are currently utilizing 4G and 5G. And as we look at future G, the new technologies around 6G and beyond that allow us to be able to communicate in real time. And so the network transport is twofold. It's the ground layer, we call it the terrestrial. It's the non-terrestrial, which is the satellite communications, and it's also the mid-tier. And the mid-tier is the Wi-Fi, the LoRaWAN, the SD-WAN. It's these other wireless networks that have to converge into our current network construct so that we can access network applications from video surveillance to Microsoft Teams or other applications that allow video communication. But at the end of the day, depending on the use case, it allows that user to access that application in real time with low latency and being able to have the ability to showcase what we call real-time situational awareness and command and control, which really means at the end of the day, knowing what's going to happen, knowing what's happening currently, and using the analytics as the data is being gathered to be able to say, hey, we have a predictive solution or we have a predictive tool to be able to showcase what's going to happen here in the future.
Predictions are always tricky because we can see what happened in the past, but that doesn't always predict what will happen in the future. What do you think is prediction's role in preparing for the future?
Great question. We look at a couple of things. Number one, network redundancy, resiliency, and failover. We know that the network eventually will fail, but not only will it fail, how fast can we recover? How fast can the user still be able to access those applications in real time? And then thirdly, it's about being able to fail over, have the resilience, but also now that the network is back up, how soon can we also actually not only access the application, but perform different types of data processing over the network, whether it's peer-to-peer network sharing and applications, whether it's I'm texting you and you're texting me. I could be on a yacht, a boat, I could be in another country. How those failover systems allow us to be able to communicate in real time very quickly and effectively. The number one challenge in this, when we talk about network transport and we talk about wireless communications, there's three things. There's capacity, there's broadband connectivity, whether it's wireless or fiber optic. The resiliency part, that's part of that. But I think the number one thing that we all have to come to grips with is when we don't have power. What happens when we don't have power and how are we able to communicate? And these are the systems that my company is building, other companies are building, and collaboratively, we're saying, hey, we know the pain points of our user, our end user, and we want to make sure that we have these failover mechanisms in place using eco-friendly technologies like solar to power our networks, making them sustainable, making them resilient. So whether it's public safety, police and fire department, ambulance, it could be an emergency disaster relief where there's no power because of a hurricane, tornado, earthquake, tsunami, where there are no communications for an extended period of time. We have the capability now to be able to access and build and deploy these types of networks very quickly in these types of environments, in these hazardous conditions. It's not always about a real wartime battleground situation. It's real-time awareness for natural disasters as well. And we have these solutions as really bringing, I like to say, let's build the future together, because it's not just one company that has all the bells and whistles. It's a collaborative effort. It's a global effort to be able to make sure that we all can communicate if and when, or when and if things like that happen.
You seem very passionate about creating the future collaboratively. What has been your journey toward this digital infrastructure field?
Great question. My journey started out with the United States Navy. I started out learning about special warfare, learning about satellite communications, and then I became a leader. And not only as a leader from leading individuals, but also leading myself to learn, continuously learn new technologies around satellite communications, wireless communications, and the frequency. The frequencies evolve not just around spectrum, it goes beyond that, because now we're talking about spectrum awareness, shared spectrum, meaning, hey, there's a certain amount of frequencies and bandwidth that are not being used for a short period of time. How can Bobby or how can Fanny use that spectrum for your or my use case for a short time and then give it back so someone else can use? And that's really where we are today. It's being able to utilize what we have efficiently and effectively for the mission. I say the mission because of my military background, but I also say it for the mission as a human race. We're human beings. We're trying to communicate with our families, our friends, our loved ones, our corporations, our businesses. And when we have these different frequencies that are flying around us, we need to be able to grab them from the air, utilize them for a short time and space, release them, and then that way someone else can use them. When we talk about sustainability, it's shared spectrum. It's giving from and to from one another, but also allowing someone else to be able to have the advantage to still communicate.
So, in your opinion, humanity's mission is to become sustainable.
One thing that I'm seeing in the world right now are cities that are, when I say sustainable, they're being regenerative. That seems to be a buzzword, but there are cities like in the United States, the Seattle, San Diego, Missouri, Miami, Washington, D.C., where they're building green areas within the city so people can do a few things. Number one, they can go for a walk. They're out of their home. They're able to breathe in what we like to say, fresh air. London, another place, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, where they're creating these environments we like to also call, there's cities and then there's micro cities within the city. You go around the block, 2 or 3 blocks, and there's a park, there's a dog park. You can relax, you can unwind, you can refresh, you can get rejuvenated. Now that you're rejuvenated, you're thinking about things a little bit differently, right? So now you're can do smart thinking, right? Whether it's working out, whether it's stretching your lower back, whether it's, hey, I'm going to have some vegetables and changing diet just to make sure that you're getting the right vegetables and nutrients in your body. It's a change of your mind. And once you start doing that over time, there's proof in science that as human beings, once we start doing some of these simple things, we wind up thinking a little bit different. We're thinking smarter. We're making crucial decisions that bring value, not just to our immediate community, but also on a broader perspective, a global community. So what Bobby does in his micro city can have a vast impact, a maximum impact globally. So it's just not that we're just doing these one-off things. It's the fact that we're champions in our city and micro cities to be able to provide a global impact in a positive way, utilizing our technologies, our small gardens, thinking differently, thinking positively, and using the social media to also bring that about as well.
What are the biggest opportunities for 5G and digital infrastructure?
The first thing around 5G and digital infrastructure is going to allow not just real-time communications. We talk about it, whether it's enhanced broadband connectivity, real-time communications out at the edge with edge compute, low latency, high bandwidth. We've heard that. So I would say that's number one. But if you look at every industry vertical, we talk about Department of Defense, we talk about hotel and tourism, entertainment. Globally, as humans, we like to have fun. We like to be entertained. We love football, both in the NFL, the National Football League, but also globally soccer. When we go to the stadiums and arenas, we want to have a fun filled moment in time. To do that, we want to share it with everyone as well. So the networks have to be modernized, the fiber optic systems, the edge compute, the low latency, all these things. So as a collective, as a human collective, we can share our fun experiences with one another using these networks. So that's number one. It's the entertainment, it's the fun. The other part of this is number two, I would say public safety. When there are things that happen that we don't like, that are not fun, whether it's natural disasters, whether it's wars, trials and tribulations, things of that nature, we want to be able to have a network that people can still reach out and communicate with family and be able to communicate that they're alive. These networks that we're building today are not only mission critical, but they're life saving systems of sustainment for our human race. We have seen it time and time again where, whether it's a mining incident, an oil rig incident, a natural disaster, or a military situation where a ship is in port and it catches fire and people are dying in the ship while the ship is actually right there by the land where the firefighters are, and they don't have communications inside the belly of the ship. We are at a stage now in our lives and in society where we have the technology to make sure these things don't happen. So as we look at what 5G can bring and 6G is coming up right here, right now as well, in parallel, I would like to say and contend that these networks are life-saving network, which is a sustainable network for our human race. The third part I would like to say is 5G and beyond provides health communication systems, not just telemedicine, but it can track different types of applications and the hardware in a hospital, for example. You have a hospital that has numerous amounts of equipment. You can track the equipment, where the equipment is to move to the next patient, to the next patient. Unfortunately, we've all been in a hospital at one point of our lives, and it's not fun, but it's even better when we know that the doctors have the equipment right there on hand to do the testing that they need to be able to do right now versus having to wait because they don't know where the equipment is. So having real-time communications with the hardware to help us in a hospital environment. So these are just a couple of use cases that hit home, right? It's perimeter security for whether it's a military base, for public safety, our border, whatever country that we live in, there's borders that we have to protect and have the right video surveillance. It's the drones, making sure that we have good drones and identifying the not so good drones, the non-friendly, the adversaries, right? So utilizing the communication systems and the networks and the 5G networks to be able to look at intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance. And then lastly, I like to go back to the fun piece of it because we know how the real world is, but we look at tourism. It takes a lot of infrastructure for the resorts to be able to be sustainable. So that way, when you come or I come or a family comes to enjoy a moment in time, that the air conditioning is working, the water, the source water is purified, the sewage systems are intact. So the food is being delivered. These are logistics. So having smart thinking, smart leadership, smart government, smart logistics, but also the smart farming, precise farming, knowing where, as we go and travel around the world and go to all these wonderful places, that there's sustainable networks that are there that are providing smart logistics so that we can eat the food that we like to eat and enjoy family time and enjoy fun time. That's where we are today. There's definitely the military, there's the Department of Defense and the Ministry of Defense and things like that in different countries, which we all know very well. But at the end of the day, utilizing the network that we as a human race can live better, have a higher quality of life, not just for one type of people, but for all. And we have that capability now, which I think is very unique from times past. You look at the last 100 years, we weren't there. Now we have the ability to reach our network, to expand our networks from a capacity standpoint, from a broadband standpoint, coverage standpoint. Satellite communications can be a further extension to where in the rural communities globally, not just in the United States, but Liberia, other places where there may not be communications, but now we can bring these communications to these cities, to these municipalities, to these micro cities that are truly maybe off grid. Even in the United States, for example, I'll just tell you a quick story. It's very interesting that the Native American Indians, who have had a massive impact to the history of the United States of America, there are a lot of Native American reservations that don't have the quality of communications that they probably should or could. And so there's a major push to make sure that the networks are reaching out to the reservations so that they have connectivity, farming areas in the United States to make sure that the farming system has the connectivity, the broadband services, so that way our farming systems can have the right food at the right place at the right time. So it's a collaborative effort. This is a big thing globally, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Do the new technologies, I assume wireless technologies, help this involvement of these communities outside of the usual infrastructure?
I would say yes, because there's a couple of things. There's the legacy networks, the 2G, the 3G networks that are, in some cases, believe it or not, that are still active. They're still roaming around. But now when you look at 4G and 5G and 5G advanced, it's infrastructure modernization. And really what that means, it's upgrading the hardware, whether it's out there at the edge on a tower to the new radio access network, also called the RAN tower, has different radios on there. And then you have what we would like to call the end user device, the UE. So having these devices, these are the next generation devices, right? So these devices connect with the modernized network. So it's being able to do quite a few things all at the same time and very much in parallel. You can have the latest and greatest network, but what if your devices cannot connect because they're so legacy? So making sure that boots to ground, the cities, the municipalities, the rural areas globally have these new mobile devices that can connect and access these new networks, providing a true end-to-end communication. So it's really about, again, government stepping in, providing funding. It's those that like to provide extra funding in different ways, right? Those that like to give as they have excess or sponsor. Some people like to say sponsor different type of opportunities and proof of concepts for over a long period of time. There's companies that are doing that right now, which is amazing, both not only here in the United States, but globally, so that people can connect. And they not only can connect, but they're connecting with the latest and greatest technology.
And we have been talking about how the wireless technologies help us go into space.
So there's a lot to that point. I'll say this. In the satellite communication world, you have the LEO, low Earth orbit, MEO, and GEO. And so there's stationary systems some people like to think they can see them. Maybe they can, or they have a telescope or whatnot. And that's great. But there's a lot of things flying around. But that's providing coverage when our terrestrial, or what we like to call our ground domain network, don't have coverage. We all know about what's happening in the satellite world with SES and Intelsat and Starlink and Hughes. The names keep going. I think at the end of the day, we're going to wind up having a globe, and that's just kind of United States, Australia, India, the UK, Spain. There's companies like Satellite, for example. They're providing a very interesting network around narrow broadband IoT, specifically, again, for IoT devices and sensors, but that utilize the 5G spectrum. So again, you're having countries that are being involved in this wave of telecommunications that provide different types of transport for specific use cases utilizing satellite communications and the 5G spectrum, high band, low band. So it's really interesting how we're going to shape this next tier, the next frontier, really. But I think as a collective, we're having the discussions, 3GPP, NTIA, the FCC, ETSI, ITU. We're at a point where we're converging all these technologies and they have to be interoperable, which is why they came out with ORAN, right? So being able to use different types of radio access networks interchangeably to be able to communicate with the core that has different functions to be able to roam in between these different networks as you move from Australia to Los Angeles, to the UK, to Spain, to Abu Dhabi, India, and so on. So it's, again, I think I said it earlier, a hyperconverged network infrastructure. It's the fiber, it's all these things that we're talking about, but it's the communication. These conversations that we're having today are going to be not only a value add to whoever's listening, but also we're saying, hey, government or governments, it's time to wake up. You've got to get funded so that way we all can be connected.
You just threw in a lot of abbreviation. What would you suggest for someone who wants to learn more about 5G and digital infrastructure to start with? How we can learn more about it?
One of the biggest things that BTI is a huge proponent of is learning. And what we're building right now, along with the Smart Cities Council, is being able to work with academia, STEM, and being able to say, hey, we have a curriculum. We're building a curriculum, not just a PowerPoint, but we want to have people in place that are educators, that are subject matter experts, that you can rely upon, that are not only building the curriculum, but now we're teaching the curriculum. So that way, when you go to different colleges and universities here later this year, you'll be able to see our footprint and say, I didn't know what that acronym means, but it's more than the acronym. How does that acronym fit into this overall hyper-converged environment? And how can I utilize this network? So we're working together, BTI and Smart Cities Council, along with other universities to globally to be able to showcase not only, again, the curriculum, but also to provide real use cases from real industry experts that have been in the trenches, in the weeds, installing, deploying, connecting fiber cables, being able to test the network using different types of latest and greatest software applications to make sure the network is up. So that way, we're just not showcasing a PowerPoint presentation. We want to be able to bring value and help people understand where we are currently and where we're going. And to your point, I think you hit the nail on the head. Being able to provide that level of education, that's where BTI and Smart Cities really bring that all together as a cohesive unit.
Bobby, you have been very generous with your time. Do you have any closing comments or requests for the audience?
Sure. I think the one thing I would like to say to the audience is stay tuned, stay agile. It's very challenging to go out and buy a new device every year, every 18 months. Not only is it costly, but most of us, we don't use all the bells and whistles on these devices. So when I say stay tuned, I say that in a very nice way because the technology is going to evolve. The chipsets inside that phone are going to change because those chipsets have to change so you can have better services, better access, faster access. As guess what? When you look at the next radio tower in another 2 years, all that instrumentation, all that hardware on that radio tower, that too is going to change. It has to because everything is in a flux of change, which is good for us so that we can have real-time communications and be able to connect with our families, our friends, our governments in real time. So I'm excited. I hope everyone else is too. Smart cities, smart bases. We're actively building this stuff through our partners and our vendors. We're all on board, not just here in the United States, but globally. We're helping our NATO partners as well. So we're really excited. I'm very thankful for this opportunity. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Bobby. If you want to learn more about Bobby, links will be provided in the show notes, and the Smart Cities Council website can inform you even more. What have you learned from this interview? What questions do you have after listening to Bobby? What would you like to know more about? Let us know on the Smart Cities Council website and on LinkedIn. Look out for other episodes with the global thought leaders or topical discussion, and thanks for tuning in.